We warmly welcome to the talk by David Dodgson, and that's about ELT Sandbox, promoting language learning through gaming. Today is Sunday, the 13th of October 2013. David is talking for RSCon, that's the this map. Oh, allow me to thank the responsible. And if you would like to indicate whereabouts you're located, you can also do that in the text chat. Grab a sun and place it on the map. And what Dave would really love to hear is, what's your professional background? Are you in language teaching? Are you in general education, K-12, public, private schools? If you could write that in a one-liner in the text chat, and whilst you're doing this, I would like to introduce Dave to you. Now, Dave.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Apologies, I closed the chat. Okay. David Dodgson is an experienced EFL teacher currently working with young learners in Turkey. He holds a Master in Educational Technology and TESOL from the University of Manchester. And he also works as a social media consultant for esolcourses.com, and he's a mentor with ITDI. His professional interests include effective use of technology to enhance learning opportunities, as well as personalizing the learning experience for students as much as possible. Now, he runs 2 blogs. I'm going to give them in the text chat in a minute. Is active on Twitter with Dave Dodgson and ELT Sandbox, and regularly presents at conferences and online events. We're looking forward today, and over to you.
Okay, thank you, Heike, for the introduction, and welcome everybody taking the time to attend my session today. I hope you find it useful. So, seems like we have a nice global spread of people. I see attendees from Europe, North, South America, and Asia as well. So yes, thank you for joining us today, and we'll get started. So yes, this session is about promoting language learning through gaming, and I call this ELT Sandbox. The reason behind Sandbox, if you're familiar with this concept in video and computer games, the Sandbox is a mode of play where you kind of get a lot of creative freedom to experiment with the game world and to play around and try things out and experiment. So that's kind of what I'm doing with video games with my learners over the last several months, and what I'm also doing with a new blog I've started. We'll be sharing the link for that later. So first, before we start, I just want to do a quick poll. Do you play video or computer games? You see the responses there. Yes, all the time. Yes, occasionally, or no, never. You can answer just, there should be under your name, you should see a little A in the square box. If you click there, you can choose either the A, B, or C answer. So just kind of want to see, do we have many gamers here? Because of course, one thing is that playing computer games, playing video games, it's not something that everyone is interested in. Excuse me, it's not something that everybody is interested in. Although, yeah, there may be many more people than you expect that are interested. Okay, so so far we seem to mainly have the Bs. So occasionally, okay, just one saying all the time, and a couple saying never. Okay, well, today I'm going to share some ideas about using games in classroom, either as the inspiration for a lesson or actually as part of the lesson themselves. So even if you don't actually play games yourself, you'll still find something here related to the topic, which hopefully you can apply in your classrooms. Okay, I should give my answer also, of course, which is A, all the time. Okay, but one thing to bear in mind with this question is that these days games are very much everywhere. Some people may say they never play games, but that's because they maybe think about games being associated with like the PlayStation or the Xbox or the PSP. A lot of people kind of overlook the fact that these days, in the last few years, we've had this explosion in gaming on smartphones and tablets with iPhone, iPad, and various Android systems, and also browser-based gaming. There are many games connected to Facebook and things that people play. And there's a little anecdote I have here. 3 or 4 years ago, I recall, just before the mid-year holiday in my class, with my classes here in Turkey, the class teacher, the homeroom teacher, was handing out their midterm reports and their mid-year reports, sorry. And she used a bit of my lesson time to do this. And as she was handing them out, she said, you know, in your holiday time, make sure you do something productive and something active. You know, read some books, go outside, visit people, play with your friends. Don't spend all your holiday sitting at home playing computer games. And then the holidays began, and on Facebook I got a friend request from this teacher. And then every time I looked at Facebook during the holiday, I had all these notifications with this teacher's name inviting me to play Farmville and Cityville. So she herself considered herself not to be a gamer, and I checked she didn't have any children, so it wasn't one of her kids. But, you know, sometimes people, as I said, just associate games with those kind of traditional forms of gaming, but the landscape of gaming is changing a lot. So, yes, I have a long kind of history with gaming. You see the photo here, this is actually me. Me in about 1987, I think, on Christmas morning. And this is when I got my first computer. It was a Commodore 64, and this was my first kind of introduction to the world of gaming. Of course, things were very different back then, but a lot of people's attitudes towards gaming these days are kind of cemented in what gaming was like in the 1980s. Ah, Michelle, you had one as well. Yes, they're great. They're very simple machines, but great. But yeah, one thing is, people always thought in those days games are just for kids, but that's no longer really true. I think I read somewhere in a survey that was done, the average age of a game-playing person turned out to be something like 35. So I don't think they ever were just for kids, because the Christmas that I received this Commodore 64, I remember at night time going to bed, and as I was drifting off to sleep, the game I played mostly that day was called Bomb Jack, and I could hear the music from Bomb Jack, and I thought it must be in my mind, and I played the game so much that the music's got stuck in my head. And then I heard my dad's voice shouting Bomb Jack and then questioning the legitimacy of Bomb Jack's parents. So then I kind of figured, okay, gaming's not just for kids, but for adults as too. Also, they're no longer these mindless bash and smash affairs. A lot of those early games, it was like you just hammered away on the fire button or a couple of keys on the keyboard. Or there were games we used to call joystick wagglers, where you'd waggle the joystick left to right like this. They're no longer like that. They're much more complex. They're no longer with random puzzles. I remember a couple of adventure games where, yes, joystick wagglers, yes. A couple of adventure games where I'd be completely stuck, and then I'd consult a guide in a games magazine or ask a friend at school, and they'd say, well, you have to find the rope, dip the rope in tar, and throw it at the monkey, and then the monkey will run away, and he will knock the door open. And, you know, it was just completely random. It wasn't logical. But they're not like that anymore. Also, not repetitive. That game I mentioned, Bomb Jack, it was essentially the same 5 levels again and again, just harder and harder each time. And games are also no longer linear, where you would just scroll from left to right or have very limited functions in what you could do. They're much more complex than that. So, what are today's games like? Well, in my opinion, they're like this. They're very much engaging. You know, I'm sure we've all come across students who seem incapable of concentrating in class for more than a few minutes, but that same child is able to sit down in front of a computer game for hours on end if their parents let them. Motivating also, you know, with my son, for example, we kind of use the motivation of, okay, if you do this, we're going to let you switch on your Wii or your PlayStation later. Also, increasingly, we're seeing games that have these complex storylines. And this is where we start to get into something about the field I work in, language learning, that a lot of games now have these cut scenes of dialogue between characters. They have messages and quests that you have to read and accept. And the game, depending on the actions of the player, can take many different directions. So, you know, they're much more complex than they used to be. And these are other good things for the class, for what we want in the classroom. Games demand problem-solving skills, critical thinking in working out what to do with games is a major feature of a lot of games. And also, I think language kind of evolves with gaming too. Take my son, for example. A couple of years ago, he was crazy for Mario. He was playing a lot of Super Mario games on the Wii. And one of the many items featured in that game is the crystal. You have to collect crystal pieces for various things. And one day we were visiting his grandmother, and she showed us an old vase which she got out, that spent years in a box, and she's kind of forgotten about it, and she put it back on display in her home. And I told my son to be careful near it because it would break easily. And he said, well, because it's made of glass. And I said, well, actually, it's not glass, it's crystal. And he laughed. He said, what? This isn't crystal. Crystal, those are small colored things you get in a computer game. So, you know, for me, my first introduction to the world of crystal was in the context of crystal vase. And for generations today, it's in a different context altogether. And also, games inspire creativity. And I can show you two perfect examples of this now from, sorry, I got a little bit ahead of myself. Yeah, I'm going to show you a couple of examples from my class with this game. I don't know if you're familiar with this game, Minecraft. Do any of you play Minecraft? Or are you familiar with the game? Do your students tell you about it? Okay, not yet, says Heike. Yeah, I mean, it's very popular. If you have children or you work with elementary, middle, or high school age students, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Well, last year, one topic that came up in class was unusual homes. And there was a project at the end of the unit, and one of the suggested projects was to write a story set in an unusual home. Another suggested project was to make a treehouse model. Now, one group of students, they said, can we set our story in the world of Minecraft? So I said, okay, why not? And then they kind of brainstormed some ideas. Now, these were three children who were not very keen on writing at all. And they came back to me a week later. On PowerPoint, they had prepared a story. The story ran for about 15 slides. Each slide was full of text and a screenshot from the game.
Yes,
sorry,
I'm hearing you clearly. Was there a problem? What about you?
Okay, well, I can hear myself clearly. So, yes, three students who were reluctant about writing, they produced this very long story. And they read it out in class. We actually made a recording of it.
Can I just sort
the story? Hi, Heike, is there a problem? Okay, well, I'll continue. And yeah, I think if I told them, no, don't set the game in Minecraft, just stick to suggested project, I'm sure they wouldn't have produced anything quite as long. And for the treehouse, I had another group in the same class who came back on the project deadline day with a video. They built a treehouse in Minecraft just for the project, and then they'd taken screenshots and put them together in a video. Now, I'm going to try to play this video for you. I hope it won't cause any problem with bandwidth. I'm just going to switch my video off while I do that. Okay, the video should be loading now. It says Minecraft House Project. Can everyone see that? In place of the slides? Okay, good. So I'm going to press play. It's about 2 minutes long. I might not play all of it, but you'll get an idea. They added some text along the bottom. There are some language mistakes, of course, because they're only kind of an elementary pre-intermediate level, but for me that's part of its charm. Anyway, okay, on the mobile you can't. I'm just going to put the link here then in the chat box. Maybe you can have a look at it later. Of course, the music is kind of maybe a bit of a copyright infringement, but we hadn't done that much on copyright at this point. Okay, we seem to be having a bit of a problem with the video loading slowly. But as I said, this is they created this specifically for a project that was set in class. And you see they've gone into quite an incredible amount of detail. And then this was great. We were able to share this on the class blog. And yeah, I mean, I personally was really impressed with the effort they went to. I'm very pleased that they were willing to put this much creativity and effort into a project for English class. I like that one too, the beautiful blue and green. And then this got huge laughs in class, the fact that they included a toilet in their treehouse. Okay, well, I'm going to go back to the presentation now. I think you've got the general idea. This does go on a bit longer, but I've shared the link in case you'd like to have a look at it later. So, you know, those things I mentioned about, you know, problem-solving skills, critical thinking, and inspiring creativity, I think these are things we all want in our classrooms, whatever we're teaching. And this is something that, because our kids, or the vast majority of our kids these days, are so interested in games, I think, you know, this is something we should be drawing on in class. So I'm going to continue now with the main part of my session. I'm going to share 3 different ideas with you about using games in class. One of the first idea is kind of a discussion where you don't actually need any game or anything like that in the lesson. Just we'll be using the topic of as the basis of discussion. And the second thing is something where we'll use something but from the games our students are interested in as the basis of a lesson. And the final idea I'll show you is something where you would actually use a game in the classroom. But just to make this clear before we continue, this session is about game-based learning. It's not about gamification. These are 2 different things that are quite often easily confused. Game-based learning, this is about bringing a game or the topic of games into the class and using it for our lesson. Gamification is more about bringing in concepts like changing your activities in class into quests, or instead of giving grades or points, giving XP and levels as feedback. That's something different. This is also about adapting non-educational materials. The ideas I show you today were not designed with the classroom and with a traditional education setting in mind. I'm not going to talk about educational games because that's something completely different. And it is about exploring possibilities. I mean, not just gaming, but with other things too. Short video clips, songs, comics. I always like to find things from the real world outside the classroom that were not designed for language learners and finding ways to bring them into the lesson. But it's not about simply playing. You know, a lot of people think, oh, game-based learning, so you just tell them to play a game and, you know, that's it. Of course, it's just like when we use film in class. I'm sure most of you will use film or YouTube clips in class. We don't just play the video and say, watch it. We usually give them some activity and we give them a task and we structure a lesson around it. So, you know, that's kind of what today's session is about. So, my first idea, if you're looking for ways to, if you're looking for a way to bring this concept of game-based learning into your class, the best way to start is to open it up with your students in a discussion and kind of see how much they're interested in it. It might be that some of your students are not that interested. And, you know, this is a good way to test the water and find out. So this discussion is based around the question, how can games be useful for language learning? And what I do in this lesson at the start, I show these kind of logos from some popular games. I'm sure you're familiar with many of these. And I ask them the question, and I'm going to ask you the same question now. Put your answers in the chat box, please. What do these games have in common? We have World of Warcraft, which you know is an online role-playing game. Grand Theft Auto 5 is a little bit of a controversial game. We'll mention the controversial aspect of gaming in a minute. Football Manager, the sports simulation. Uncharted and Assassin's Creed, these are kind of adventure games, and Call of Duty, which is a kind of first-person shooter, we call it. Okay, Julio says, well, Football Manager, does it sound like a violent game? Okay, maybe that connects a lot of the games. Interaction with other players. Well, of course, World of Warcraft is online. Grand Theft Auto, Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, and Football Manager, they all have a kind of online extent, but Uncharted does not. So beginning, middle, end. So yes, there is, yeah, the Football Manager maybe doesn't really have an end. But yeah, a lot of them do have that kind of structured story. Yes, Adam, $10 million to make. Yes, well, these games do make huge amounts of money. Okay, very similar to real people. Yes, well, yeah, they do bear lots of similarities to the real world. Well, my students will discuss this, and they will come out with similar responses to what you have, and then I tell them the thing that ties all of these games together is the English language. Okay, you play Warcraft, you go and speak to a quest giver, and the quest appears as a written paragraph in English. Grand Theft Auto, you watch these cutscenes with characters in dialogue. It's all in English. The same for Uncharted and Assassin's Creed. Football Manager, you get messages in the game and you get feedback on the matches you played. You get transfer news, media reports in English. Call of Duty, you get your missions in English. If you play on, chances are you will end up interacting with the other online players in English. So this is good just to kind of drive home that point to our students that this English, it's not just a lesson. This is something that happens. It's a language. It's out there in the real world, and it's global. So then I say, okay, so you get massive exposure to English from these games, but that doesn't, just having massive exposure doesn't make it useful in itself. So how can games be useful for language learning? So I'm going to throw this question to you. What do you think? You share some thoughts in the chat box. I did this lesson with one of my classes about 2 weeks ago. On the next slide, I'm going to show you their answers. But I'd like to see if you come up with something similar or something different. So what do you think? How can games be useful for language learning? Okay, so Adam says there is a need to understand and genuine motivation. Yes, yes, I think that's something important. I mean, I've lost count of the amount of times over the years my students have come and asked me, what does this word mean? Or they show me a sentence they've written down. What does this mean? And it turns out to be something from a game that they couldn't understand. So yeah, fun. Okay. So learning when having fun. Yes, Michelle, you're right. There's a massive exposure to reading and listening. Yeah, looking in the dictionary, kind of connected to what Adam said about finding out language, practicing grammar. Yeah, there'll be all kinds of different language they're exposed to. Processing, yes, so reading that language, hearing it, and kind of in your mind transforming it into actions in the game. Of course, vocabulary, yes, quite an extensive vocabulary comes through in the game. Well, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to show you my students' answers. So they came up with these things. So reading, so in-game instructions, also manuals. I was surprised to learn that they actually read those. So interacting with characters in the game, so going up, talking to them, listening to them, responding to their questions. Then this idea with online games, chatting with other players in English. So either text chat or with a headset. You know, quite often it might be, I've got one of my students in Turkey, they're playing a game and they end up interacting with someone in Czech Republic or Argentina or Japan. English language is the only choice for them to communicate. Again, with reading, this idea of the walkthrough. So they get stuck in a game, they Google the game, something about the game, and then they find a website which has a step-by-step walkthrough guide to completing that quest or that level. Also, you can find videos like this on YouTube. And yes, language investigation was the phrase I gave to this. So they go and look for words in the dictionary. They ask their parents, their elder siblings, their teacher for help because they want to understand what's in the game. Okay, and then I put this question to my students. Now, I said, if we're going to use games for language learning, what are the pros and cons? So again, same question to you. What are the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages of using games for language learning or for learning in general? And I will show you my students' responses after I've seen some of yours. Okay, yes, there's that issue of the language they're exposed to. What kind of language is it? In games, they might come across slang, they might come across swearing. I know a lot of my students, I've noticed an increase in bad language over the last several years. Time, okay, maybe if you're using a game in class, it must be something short, something that they can do within a short. Yeah, sometimes without using the language they can proceed in the game. I know lots of people, if there's something to read or a long cutscene, they just hit space or escape and skip it. Yeah, okay, archaic use. So yeah, if like Assassin's Creed, they might get a lot of kind of old English. Okay, yeah, interacting with the other gamers, they might pick up things that are not correct from non-native speakers. Okay, so yes, a space they're comfortable with, and yeah, there's that argument, Adam, isn't there? All exposure is good exposure. Well, this is what my students came up with. You can see there their pros. So they talked about learning in a useful way, learning in context. Okay, vocabulary, learning through play, exposure to different kinds of English. I like the last one too, games don't give homework. On the cons, yeah, there's bad language, so slang or swearing, those kind of things. The risks of playing online, they're very much, I found my students are quite savvy in this area. They're very much aware of the risks of, interacting with strangers online. Some vocabulary is specific to gaming and not useful outside the game, or the gaming, or just general gaming or that specific game. And yeah, some of the things that we've already mentioned. And also the fact that not everyone enjoys the same games. Not everyone enjoys games. But, these are the kind of things I try to find out by putting these questions to my students to gauge interest, see how much they're into games. So, and that kind of discussion, if it's well managed and moderated, it can take up 20, 30 minutes, maybe a full lesson. Some other ideas for discussion, if your students are into games, I put some more ideas here. What makes a good game? What makes a bad game? Getting them to think about that. What does the future hold for games? I like to show them there so you can find footage on YouTube, like Grand Theft Auto. I've got some high school students who play that, and I show them footage from the original game in the 1990s, and they're sometimes quite shocked by how poor the graphics are. So then I say, okay, now think of the game looks now. What's it going to be like in another 20 years? At a more basic level, just tell us about your favorite game. Sometimes I find so many kids are into games that they're just, the topic of games, they're so enthusiastic to talk about it, much more than if you say, okay, what's your daily routine? What do you eat for breakfast? What do you do on Sunday? But if you say, tell me about your favorite game, they're kind of much keener to talk. Okay, lesson idea 2, alter egos. So here you can see some avatars. These are characters used in a game which the player themselves creates. Now, could you guess who may have created these avatar characters? Any ideas? Oh, look, we have some kind of handsome-looking guys here with a little goatee beard, short dark hair. Yes, well done, Gabor. It's me. These are all different versions of me. One from The Sims, one from Warcraft, and one from Star Wars game. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff we can do with these. I've been doing a lot of work recently in my classes with these. The first idea, introduce your virtual self. Now, we, of course, spend the first lessons, the first week of the school year, doing introductions, getting to know you activities. But quite often I end up with classes where all the students already know each other. I am new, but they already know each other. So I get them to, rather than talk about yourself, I say talk about your game character. Choose a game you like. It might be Warcraft, it might be The Sims, that's very popular. It might be the avatar you use in Minecraft. And tell us about that person. Describe them. Bring in a screenshot from your game so we can see them in class. And introduce your character to the class. And then I've also used this as a blog activity. So sometimes maybe if my class don't know each other, we do the normal introductory getting to know you things in class. But then I put this on the blog as an activity on the blog, maybe in the 2nd or 3rd week of term. And I show them my avatar here, my Jedi Knight from the Star Wars game, and I give them some information about him, and then I ask them to do the same. And I find a way to practice this language. Quite often, especially if students, like my students are 5th graders, they've been learning English since preschool, and you ask them, describe yourself, talk about your hobbies, and they say, oh, again, we do this every September. Here, you tell them to do it, but with their game character, and they never say that. Oh, but, describing my face, talking about I can, I can't. I have done this before. They never say it. They forget about it, and they just focus on communicating. Okay, another idea. This is one we'll hopefully have a bit of fun with. I get my students to, I ask them to bring me screenshots or email me screenshots of the avatars they use in different games. And then we display them in class, maybe on a PowerPoint slide, or if they've given me printouts on the wall. And I say, okay, have a good look at these avatars and look at your friends in the class and try to match them, match the avatar with its owner. In this case, I've used people who are connected with the Reform Symposium, or you might know if you're a language teacher and you're using Twitter or Facebook as part of your professional development, you may be familiar with some of these people. A couple of these people are here, but any guesses, these avatars, who they might be, people connected with the Reform Symposium? Okay, Michelle thinks she's seen Heike. Which one do you think is Heike, Michelle? Yes, top left. That is indeed our dear moderator, Heike, from Second Life, her avatar from Second Life. Clive, yes, this isn't actually a game avatar, of course, but I was kind of, I needed something to fill the space. This is actually something one of Clive's former students created on Paint for him, but I thought, you know, although it's not a gaming avatar, it was relevant to include. Okay, well, the other ones, if you don't recognize them, bottom right is Michelle Morgan. This is an avatar she was using on the Future of Education RSCOM website. Not created with the game again, but I thought it would be fun to include it. The other two, actually, I tried to get some more people to help me, but I was running out of time. The top right is my not very good attempt to recreate our dear organizer Shelley Terrell in Star Wars. The one in the middle is a very poor attempt to recreate Chu Pang as a Warcraft character, but I think the only thing I possibly got right was the lack of hair. Okay, but this is something you can do in class too. I'm sure Chu will forgive me. And then I asked them after this, okay, which game do you think each avatar is from? See if they can recognize anything about that. And then we have a speaking activity. Describe the differences between the avatar and its creator. Now, of course, there's always the risk here that, especially with younger learners, they may be unkind. So I kind of tried to teach them how to make compliments and things like that. You know, they might, so they don't end up saying, oh, this avatar looks much cooler than the real person or something like that. So we might say things like, Heike's avatar has longer hair than she does. Or Michelle's avatar is wearing sunglasses, but she is not. Michelle doesn't have a bird on her head, something like that. Shelley Terrell is always smiling, but her avatar is not. So, you know, that's a very productive, engaging activity, I find. Another idea, character cards. I get them then with their avatar. You know, like if you play Top Trumps or trading cards with games, you'll see things like this. And so I get them to get a printout of the avatar, or maybe do this on the blog, and then just fill in some basic information. So this is one of mine. Name, which game is it from, species, and then some things about the abilities, a basic description. This is, of course, with beginner learners. Higher level language learners could maybe write a bio, a more lengthy bio about their character. Some more ideas. One thing I liked a couple of years ago, a couple of my students did this. There was a project about family, and they made a family on The Sims and like did some family snapshots. And instead of talking about the family, they talked about their family from The Sims. There's a website called mecharacters.com. Sorry, the links are not live, so I'll just try to put that here. This is, if you know the Nintendo Wii system, you can create a, they call it a me, like an avatar, which is used in various games. And this website has various famous people recreated as avatars, so you can use that for a kind of guess who game of describing to. Also, we've done role plays where two avatars from different games meet or stories with them. Another thing which I've tried with a couple of one-to-one students is I give them a description and I ask them, using a game of their choice for homework, to try and recreate the avatar. So maybe they create it with The Sims or with Warcraft or with Minecraft even, and then we compare what the same character would look like in different games. Okay, the last idea, I'm going to rush through this a bit because I want to leave a few minutes for questions and answers. This is based on a game called Can You Escape? It's actually a smartphone tablet game. You can get it, I think, on iPhone. You can get it on Android as well. Are any of you familiar with this game, Can You Escape? Okay, not yet. Well, I recommend you check it out. It is quite addictive. So yeah, it's a kind of escape the room thing. So on the screen you see a room. There are various objects around the room and a door, and you have to unlock the door. But it's not that simple, of course. You can't just unlock it. You have to maybe find the key, or maybe find a number code or a color code to unlock the door. So this has a for language learning. Here you can see a screenshot of level 1 of the game. Okay, well, Michelle, if you're bad at these games, this is still something you could use with your learners. So I'll show you how. So I show my learners, this works best with small groups because it's on a tablet. But if you're doing like a bring your own device kind of thing, you could ask them to preload the game before the lesson so they each have a copy. Shelley's avatar in Second Life, yes. We'd love to see that if you have it. First of all, for language learning, the first thing that will scream out at any ELT professional is household objects, prepositions. So we can say things like, oh, look on the sofa, look on the bookshelf, look behind the picture, and those kind of things. And I show them the game and I say, okay, I'm trying to do this, but I'm not very good at this game. Can you help me? And I get my students to give me advice. So they tell me, why don't you look on the bookcase? Okay, there is a small key on the bookshelf. Take it. Try to open the chest. And these kind of... So we've got the language there of suggestions and advice. We've got the language of describing where things are. So there's a lot of language that can come with this. Then I say, okay, level 2, this is really hard. So I tell them, okay, what I want you to do now, instead of them, I say, you know, you've all given me different things. I want to do this quickly. So I tell them, go online and do a search for Can You Escape level 2 walkthrough. Now I mentioned before, a walkthrough is like a step-by-step guide. So then they go to a website and then we get a reading activity. They have to read through the guide, and then I ask them to tell me what they learned and tell me how to complete the level. So it's kind of like a reading comprehension activity by stealth, because they don't actually realize that's what they're doing. Or they might find a screencast video on YouTube, and they can watch that and then report back. Okay, and then I say, okay, I think you're getting good at this game. So then I show them level 3, and of course this works better if you've just got a small group or everyone has access to the game on their own device. And I say, okay, this time I give you 10 minutes or whatever to play this level. I want you to complete it, note down what you do, and then write your own walkthrough. Or, you know, maybe they can orally present their own walkthrough to the class, and we can compare the different groups, what did they try, in what order, who maybe did it faster and who did it better. So again, they're now getting involved in a discussion and a writing activity, but again, without really realizing that that's what they're doing. And then as a final thing, they can make their own level. I found this on Larry Folazzo's website. He shared this other website called Room Escape Maker. Okay, you see the address there. Unfortunately, the link is not live, but I will give you a link to my slides at the end of the session, so you can view it from there. Room Escape Maker. So here you register on the website, create your account, and then you make your own escape the room level. And then they can share those with the other students. They can give their own walkthroughs to them. You know, there's a lot of stuff. This kind of a nice productive way to end this lesson or series of lessons. Now, I've used Can You Escape as an example here, but you can adapt this idea to many. Minecraft, for example. So many of my okay, thank you for sharing the link there. So many of my students were playing Minecraft last year that I got a copy of the iPad version. And then I said to my students, well, you know, how do I play this game? And I got them to teach me about the basic mechanics of doing something in the game of Minecraft. And then I said, well, okay, one of the aims of the games is to stay safe from these creepers, these zombie-like creatures. So what's the best way to do that? Help me. And I got them to give me this advice, which they were very keen to do. And it really got them producing a lot of English. So more ideas for using walkthroughs. Of course, they could write a walkthrough for a game of their choice, any game they play, or do a screencast video walkthrough to practice speaking. This is one that I am going to try soon with a couple of one-to-one students I have, a gap fill walkthrough. So give them the walkthrough, but with some words deleted or some sentences deleted, and then ask them to play through the level and try to complete the text. Could also work with a jumble text too, where you jumble up the steps and ask them to reorder them. Also, this is a bit of a gamification idea. Write a walkthrough style text, but for a non-gaming activity. Like students are very bored of writing their daily routines maybe, so get them to do a walkthrough to their daily routine, or a walkthrough to making a cup of tea, something like that. So using the kind of language they're familiar with from real game walkthroughs and adapting it to. Okay, so time's expired pretty much. Thanks for playing. Thanks for joining. Here you can see links to the blog. It's eltsandbox.weebly.com. I'm just going to share that in the chat box. Please, you know, visit the blog. I'm sharing more ideas here all the time. It's kind of, I only started this about a month ago, so you know, I'm adding more stuff all the time. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter, or email me if you have any questions. If you have a question now, we have about 10 minutes left, so if you'd like to take the microphone or type a question in the chat box, I'd be happy to answer. In the meanwhile, I'm just going to share a couple more of my links. And yes, Heike, we would love to see Ellie's photo, a real avatar rather than my poor attempt.
You actually see this one.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for your comments in the box. Any questions though? I'd be happy to answer.
Do you see the picture in the middle?
Ah, yes. So yes, with the ever-present Roscoe. Okay, well, Ursula, I hope maybe you'll think about doing something with gaming or the topic of gaming now. Hopefully, we shared some ideas. Okay, playing the game for homework. Not really. I might give them something general, like if we're going to do that thing like writing a walkthrough, I'll ask them to make sure they're very familiar with a specific level or quest of a game so they can work on the walkthrough in class. Or, as I mentioned with the avatars, I might give them a description and say, okay, with a game that you have at home, or if they don't have a game at home, I point them in the direction of a couple of websites where you can create avatars, and I say, okay, go home and make this, and then bring it back to class. I haven't had much of a chance to use stuff in class. I've used something called ELT Sandbox in class, which, well, it's kind of a game. It's kind of a simulator as well of how the universe works. So I've used that for a CLIL-style lesson. But then you can also do some gaming-style things like explode the moon, or, you know, put Saturn's rings around the Earth and just see what kind of chaos unfolds. I've used that in class. And with some one-to-one stuff or some small groups, we've used games as well. Generally, in class, it's the topic of games that it's easier to focus on. Okay, so yeah, Gabriel has a good question. So choosing a game for a class activity, well, there are certain games which just seem to be universally popular. Minecraft, nearly all of my students play it or want to play it. The Sims, a lot of my students play that as well. And then a lot of the games which are apps for tablets, like you know, Angry Birds, Cut the Rope, Where's My Water, this Can You Escape? Some of my students didn't know about it, but I told them about it, and then they all started playing it. So I kind of find out what games they're interested in, and making sure it's engaging for everyone. I mean, of course, in a young learner context, I can't really use any of those more controversial games that have extreme violence or bad language. But I can use those things like the avatar activity, which doesn't focus on a specific game, but what games the students are interested in. That makes sure it's engaging for everyone. Other times, just the fact that you're doing something different. You're not just using a traditional reading text or showing them a kind of documentary video. Just the fact that it's something different kind of engages a lot of the students. So yeah, I kind of already playing with students. With some one-to-one and small groups, I do. I've done that with the Can You Escape and with Minecraft. And yeah, we don't always have the capability to play that much in class, but I've done things like where I'm playing something on the computer or the iPad, and I got them giving me advice, making suggestions as I do it. Ursula, yes, Angry Birds does not have much language. Also, there's a game called Cut the Rope. I don't know if you know this game. There's no language in the game, but both that game and Angry Birds, they have a accompanying series of videos, like these short cartoon adventures on YouTube, officially made by the people who make the game, that don't have any language in either, but I find there's lots of activities we can do with those. We do like an observation quiz, so I ask them to watch a video very carefully and, you know, which of these events happened first, or what color was the umbrella in the background, that kind of thing. I have actually written a blog post about one of the, if I can find the link quickly. Or I get them to then watch the video a couple of times, describe the events that happen in the video, then they watch the video again and try to reorder them. There's a link to the blog post. So this is not actually using a game, but it's a game-related thing, again, the topic of gaming, which really kind of engages them.
Sorry, but
okay,
I have to close it. One last question. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, most of the games, of course, are English. That is kind of the universal language of gaming. A lot of games do have multiple language options. Warcraft, for example, you can play on French, German, or Russian servers, and I think it's also available in a number of Asian languages, Korean and Chinese as well. So there are games with language options. So if you are teaching a different language, maybe you could make use of those.
Thank you ever so much, Dave. A wonderful suggestion for engaging with your learners about the topic that interests them. Thank you so much.